Spring Framework provided JdbcTemplate as a higher level abstraction over JDBC API to interact with the SQL databases. However, its API still feels a little bit verbose and not very developer friendly. Let us take a look at a couple of examples that are using JdbcTemplate. Here in the save method, we are trying to insert a new record into bookmarks table and return the auto-generated primary key value. As you can see, by using JdbcTemplate.update, we are relying on low-level JDBC API in order to retrieve the auto-generated primary key values here. And also we have another method here, find by ID, to find a bookmark for the given ID value. And a bookmark may or may not exist. That's why we want to return an optional of bookmark type. But here, if you see, we are trying to use query for object method, which is going to throw an exception if a bookmark object is not found with the given ID. So we need to catch empty result data access exception and then return optional of empty. While we can achieve our goal by using JdbcTemplate, as you can see, it looks a little bit more verbose. To provide a better alternative to JdbcTemplate, Spring Framework 6.1 introduced JdbcClient, which provides Fluent API to interact with the SQL databases. Let us see how we can use JdbcClient to interact with the database and perform CRUD operations. Let us create a Spring Boot application with JDBC API dependency. So here I'm going to select JDBC API and Flyway for database migrations, and I'm going to use H2 database for this application. Next, I'll create a Flyway migration script to create the bookmarks table. So I'm going to create my first Flyway migration script v1 __ init.sql. And here I'm creating a bookmarks table with columns ID, title, URL, and created _at. Now let me create a Java record that represents a bookmark. Here I'm going to create a new Java class called bookmark, and it's going to be a Java record. Now let us create bookmark repository class. Now I'm going to mark it as a Spring Bean by adding this at repository annotation, and I'm going to inject JdbcClient by using constructor injection. Now let us start with implementation of findAll method, where we are going to read all the data from bookmarks table, bind each row values into a bookmark object instance, and then return list of bookmarks. So here we have findAll method implementation, and the query that we are going to run is select ID, title, URL created from bookmarks table. And then we are using JdbcClient API, and we specified the SQL that we would like to execute. And then we are calling .query and then specifying the class reference into which we want to populate the values. And then finally calling the .list method to return a list of whatever the type we specified here. So when we use a class reference here, it is going to internally use a RowMapper implementation that is provided by Spring Framework out of the box. Let's take a look at a RowMapper interface implementations that are coming out of the box. So in our case, it is going to use simple property RowMapper. If you take a look at the Java doc here, you can see if there is a column alias that has underscores in its name, and if the class doesn't have the exact property name, it is going to convert that into camel case and then call the setter method. In our case, we have created _at as a column name, but in our bookmark, we have created it, which is kind of a camel case representation for the same. So Spring internally is going to take care of converting that value and then populate the created _at column value into this field. So that's why we can simply specify this class and then call the .list method. But if for any reason you want to have a custom RowMapper implementation, you can provide a custom RowMapper implementation instead of calling bookmark.class. Let us see how we can implement a custom RowMapper and then use that. So here I have created a bookmark RowMapper which implements RowMapper of bookmark type, and I am getting the data from result set and then populating that into a new bookmark instance. Now instead of calling this, I can change that to new bookmark RowMapper. I can pass an instance of that and it is going to take care of using this RowMapper and then creating each result set mapped to a new bookmark object and finally return all the objects as a list of bookmarks. Next, let us implement find by ID method. Here in this find by ID method, we are selecting a bookmark for the given ID value, and we are using JdbcClient, pass the SQL statement that we want to execute and provide the input parameters for this named parameters using param and give the name of the input and the value. And again, we are using query specifying the object into which we want to populate the values. And finally, we are calling single. So here, by calling the single method, we are expecting one single record to be returned from bookmarks. But what if there is no bookmark for the given ID? Then it is going to throw an exception. So usually while implementing find by ID, we would like to return an optional of object type. So here we will change it to optional of bookmark. And instead of calling single, we can change it to optional. So in this case, if there is only one object, it is going to wrap in an optional and then return it. If there is no object for the given ID, it is going to return optional of empty. So this is how the Fluent API is making it easy, and then using optional or single, we can return whatever the expected value in a much simpler and concise way. Next, let us implement save method in which we are going to insert a new record into bookmarks table and return the auto-generated primary key value. In the save method, we have our SQL statement in which we are inserting a new record into bookmarks using the named parameters. And we are using key holder to hold the auto-generated key values. And we are executing by calling JdbcClient.SQL, passing the SQL statement and specifying the input parameter values using the Fluent API, and finally calling the update method. Now, if there is only one generated key, you can directly call keyholder.getKey and specify what type of key you are expecting. If there are multiple keys that are being generated, then you can call keyholder.getKeys.get and specify the column name, and you can get the value as an object, and you need to pass it to whatever the data type you are expecting it to. As you can see, JdbcClient provides this Fluent API, and you don't need to rely upon low-level JDBC API to get the auto-generated key values here. Next, let us implement update bookmark method. In the update method, we have the SQL statement that we want to use, and we are using JdbcClient with SQL statement and parameters to set the updated values to it and then calling update method. So when we are executing any DML statements like insert or update or delete, it is going to return the number of rows updated. In our case, we are expecting it to update only one record. And if there are no records with the given ID, then we are checking and then throwing the exception bookmark not found with the given ID value. So if you want to count how many records are updated, this update method is going to return the number of rows updated. Similarly, we can also implement the delete bookmark method by using SQL statement, and then here if you notice, in addition to using named parameters, we can also use positional parameters and then specify the index and pass the value here. And finally calling the update method. So as you can see, JdbcClient provides a Fluent API using which you can pass the SQL statement, set the input parameter values, and then call update or query method, and then you can execute the statement. In the case of queries, to get the data, you have multiple options of whether using custom RowMapper or rely upon the built-in RowMappers, and also you can return optional or a single object. So you have this Fluent API, which is very easy to use, and you can perform all kinds of database operations. Finally, let us see how we can test our repository, which is using JdbcClient. Let's create a test class and let's add JDBC test annotation. This is a slice test annotation from Spring Boot, which can be used to test JDBC based repositories. Now we can auto wire either JdbcTemplate or JdbcClient. As we have used JdbcClient, let us inject JdbcClient and we can create a reference to our bookmark repository. And in our setup method, we can initialize bookmark repository equals to new bookmark repository and pass the auto wire JdbcClient. Now we can write our test and verify the behavior. Another way to inject bookmark repository is we can import bookmark repository class and we can directly auto wire bookmark repository. So now that we have our bookmark repository injected, let us write a test and call find all method and then verify the behavior. But before that, let us use a SQL script to initialize some sample data, and then we will use add SQL annotation to run that script before every test method. Under test resources, I'm going to create test data.sql and I'm deleting all the records from bookmarks and then I'm inserting some sample records. So now we can write a test. Here we can call bookmarks.findAll method. And we can assert that bookmarks has size of 10 records. So here in the script, I have inserted 10 records. And in order to specify to run that test data.sql, I can use add SQL and specify test data.sql. So here it's going to execute this test data.sql file from root of the class path, and then it's going to verify the number of bookmark records that are written from find all and then assert it to size 10. Let's run this and verify the behavior. So the test is passed. So similarly, you can write remaining test and then verify the behavior. As you have seen, JdbcClient provides a better alternative to JdbcTemplate with its Fluent API and convenience methods. So going forward, it is recommended to use JdbcClient instead of JdbcTemplate. The sample application is available in my GitHub repository and you can find the link to the repository in the video description. Happy coding!